A fix is slowly coming for contaminated wells in one historically Black Osceola community. You're listening to the WraP from Central Florida Public Media. I'm Brendan Byrne. Plans are in place to transition a historically Black community in Osceola County from contaminated wells onto a public drinking water supply. But a timeline for executing these plans remains uncertain, as the county waits on state and federal funding that was previously approved for the total $2.3 million project. In the Whitted community, water samples tested by the Florida Department of Health in Osceola County contain high levels of arsenic and certain types of PFAS, or forever chemicals, to trigger health concerns for residents.
We were told by our parents not to ever drink the water. Then we had concrete evidence of do not drink the water.
A look at that story. That's ahead on the WraP. The big stories this week from Central Florida Public Media. But first, these news headlines. Taking a page from billionaire Elon Musk's push to cut federal spending, Governor Ron DeSantis on Monday announced a new panel that will review around 900 state positions, university spending, local government spending, and the need for about 70 state boards and commissions. That includes 12 public universities that will be subject to an independent audit. DeSantis says first and foremost, the state DOGE task force will look at how money is being spent at these schools. Then, he says some courses and programming might also be cut that are considered, quote, ideological, end quote, or supportive of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
It's not like it's rigid, but some of the ideological studies stuff, we just want to prune that and get that out, and we want to make sure that these universities are really serving the classical mission of what a university should be.
The new state task force will have 1 year to make recommendations. Sheriffs across the state expect to start ramping up immigration enforcement, targeting tens of thousands of immigrants in the state illegally who are accused of committing felonies or already have a deportation order from a judge. The Florida Sheriff's Association announced this week all of the state's 67 county sheriffs signed agreements with the federal government to cooperate with federal authorities to detain undocumented migrants for deportation. But the Sheriff's Association acknowledged that a big problem stands in the way: not enough bed space to house thousands of migrants. The state's 67 county jails and detention centers only have about 2,000 available beds. Flagler County Sheriff Rick Staley said that is not stopping his office, and he's offered about 100 beds in his jail to ICE agents.
And I have 5 deputies that are still ICE warrant service officers, so we're up and running. In fact, we've already transferred 10 to ICE and Border Patrol, and they took them to Baker County to be processed. So it is working.
But Staley added he doesn't foresee mass roundups of migrants happening in Flagler due to limited staffing and jail space. Florida wildlife officials will hold a series of online meetings in March and April about the possibility of a return to bear hunting in the state. Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation says the first meeting will be open to anyone who wants to provide feedback on a potential bear hunt and will be held on March 13th. 3 more will be held in April. Bear hunting has long been a controversial issue in Florida, but calls have increased for wildlife officials to approve the first hunt in a decade. These stories and more on our website. Visit cfpublic.org. State Senator Geraldine Thompson will be buried this weekend at Woodland Memorial Park in Gotha. Thompson made it her life's work to preserve Black history in Central Florida.
There's so much of our history that deliberately has been left out that we have to go back and claim it, go back and fetch it, as the African word Sankofa signifies.
More on the life and legacy of State Senator Geraldine Thompson. That's on our website, cfpublic.org. Funding's been set aside to transition a historically Black community in Osceola County from contaminated wells onto a public drinking water supply. Still, as Central Florida Public Media's environment reporter Molly Durig explains, change is slow to come in the historic Whitted community.
Just south of the hub of construction and traffic ramping up with Lake Nona's new development activity in North Osceola County, there's a residential area where things quiet down a bit. Here in Narcoossee, a white schoolhouse built in 1886 sits on the main drag. Driving back into the neighborhoods down Jones Road, homes sit on large, single-family lots, about 53 of them, with more breathing room than the homes going up today in surrounding new developments. This is the historic Whitted community, named for one of the young African-American families that first settled here back in 1886, a year before Osceola County itself came to be.
Everybody that lives here knew my grandfather, Stanley Whitted.
Tracy Paul descends from both the Whitted family and another local pioneer family, the Pauls. She says her grandparents on the Whitted side served as deacons at the church on Jones, which is more than 135 years old.
They were like the matriarch and patriarch of Narcoossee.
Paul's 55 and has lived here most of her life. Like most residents here, she says she's always gotten water from a well for things like cleaning, but
we were always told not to drink the water. We didn't know why.
Now she does. Testing by the Florida Department of Health in Osceola County reveals wells here in Whitted are contaminated. Arsenic and certain types of PFAS, forever chemicals, are in the groundwater at what the health department says are high enough levels to potentially trigger health issues, including higher cancer risk. Paul finds herself wondering about her autoimmune disorder.
They can't figure out what's causing it. And I'm sitting here in my life going back thinking, did I drink the water? Because I've lived in the Narcoossee area my entire life.
Paul says she finds herself wondering how long these wells have been contaminated and whether her parents and grandparents were affected.
How long have they been dealing with this, but they never asked the question of why? Us as a younger generation, well, we want to know why. You're telling me I can't drink the water, but why?
That's where Paul's cousins come in. Twin sisters Jessica and Jennifer Paul.
Your community is only what you make of it.
That's Jennifer Paul, recently elected as the first Black city council member representing nearby St. Cloud in over a century. Her sister Jessica is leading the movement they started to get Whitted residents off of well water and onto a centralized, safe drinking water source. Jessica says it all began with concerns about the big vacant overgrown lot right behind her house.
This wetland back here, that's where the old dump used to be at.
She says family members remembered playing in the dump as kids. Initially, the Florida Department of Environmental Protection couldn't find any record of a dump site here. But Jessica and Jennifer did their own research. They found a lease from 1964 confirming the site was used for sanitary landfill and garbage disposal purposes before the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency and regulations for chemical dumping. Back then, FDEP says waste materials at this unlined landfill site would have often been in direct contact with the groundwater table.
And I think the concern was, can we get the water tested?
FDEP's survey of the site in late 2022 revealed concerningly high levels of contaminants in soil and groundwater. That led to the state health department in Osceola testing area wells and verifying the public health threat.
You know, it was a journey.
The Paul sisters speaking up made a difference. Now, $2.3 million in combined state and federal funding is set aside to expand St. Cloud's water system to the Whitted area and get residents there off of well water. That funding was confirmed last year, but work on the project, originally slated to start last July and wrap up at the end of this year, still has yet to start. Raymond Stengel, Osceola County's Community Development Administrator, says the state and federal grant awards are a package deal.
So unfortunately, since we've got the two agencies involved, we've got to get both documents signed up before we start any process.
According to some peer-reviewed studies, minority communities are more likely to live somewhere with drinking water violations and experience public health disparities as a result. And for minority communities, drinking water violations take significantly longer to resolve compared to white communities. Public water systems are subject to regular testing and monitoring, but private wells are not.
You know, over the years, we have been overlooked in the community.
In 2020, Osceola County established a special Narcoossee zoning district and left the Whitted area out of it.
Point us on the map. Where are we on the map? I mean, you can see the line traced where our community was outside of the line.
Stengel with the county acknowledges that was a mistake.
They should have been included in the original. I think it was a simple oversight. Sometimes we see a neighborhood and we don't recognize the significance of it, but we recognize now they should be in the overlay, and we're going to get them recognized officially in our land development code.
Stengel says that should be happening in the next few months. As far as the water connection project, realistically, Whitted residents are looking at several years before the work is done.
The water on.
Tracy Paul has been ready for work on the water connection project to begin. A filter is in place on her well for the contaminants, but now the water is coming out brownish and gritty with sand.
You know, I wish my grandparents were here to really understand, hey, you were absolutely right telling us not to drink the water.
But Paul says she's glad to have answers now and to see what progress can happen when community members stay engaged.
Be proactive, be engaged in your community. If you see something, say something. Ask a question.
Molly Durig, Central Florida Public Media.
That's it for the WRAP this week, but stay listening. A bill making its way through the Florida legislature would ban undocumented students from attending some public universities and colleges in the state. Next week, we'll dive into the proposed legislation and effects on students here in Central Florida. This podcast is produced by Central Florida Public Media with assistance from News Director LaToya Dennis and Digital Director Ryan Ellison. I'm Brendan Byrne. This is the WRAP.